This cross-country adventure started with our 288 Sierra Lima training aircraft. Students love it, and I wanted to find something with the same panels and generally the same instrument layout so I could interchange between one and the other. Well, I was able to find a similar Sling Aerosport through Jeremy and Daniela. So there it was, sitting in the hangar, ready to go. Okay, now the only complication is the aircraft was here in Chicago, and I needed to get it out here almost to California. So we go to ForeFlight, we put it in our airport here, we put it in our airport here, and we get a total distance around 1,400 miles, 72 gallons, estimated time, 16 hours, and this is saying 11 knot headwind. Now that's a reasonable headwind to plan for. Can't make a 16-hour flight, so if we cut that in half, it would be like 2 8-hour flights. Where would we stop? Well, it looks like right here. And let's go to Cheyenne Airport, regional airport. There we go. So that's about halfway. So that would give us a couple of 8-hour flights if we could accomplish that. So there's a good start. Instead of looking at just the idiot box here, we're going to go ahead and do some calculations here and see what we got. Now, I know that the fuel burn is 4 gallons per hour at 100 knots true airspeed because I've flown my other Sling, and I know that's the situation. Now, that's with a 912 fuel-injected engine. So we're going to do 4 scenarios. We're going to do a scenario with a 20-knot headwind, 10-knot headwind, calm wind, and a 10-knot tailwind. Now, we're going to use 1,500 miles. We're going to cut that in half, so we're going to do this per leg. So, of course, we can do a simple math here. 20-knot headwind is going to be 80 ground speed knots. 10-knot headwind is going to be 90. Calm wind is going to be 100-knot true airspeed. It's going to be 100-knot ground speed. And, of course, if we have a tailwind, it's going to be 110-12. Now, of course, as you know, through cross country, everything's based on your ground speed. And from your cross country planning, we know that we've got our airspeed here in true knots versus our ground speed is what counts. From that, we can get our timing. So our time would be our distance in nautical miles divided by our ground speed. Okay. So we can see 9.4 hours, 8.3 hours, 7.5 hours, 6.8 hours. Now we get our fuel per leg. So now we can take our time times our gallons per hour to give us our fuel per leg. And we can see 37, 33, 30, 27. Now, luckily, in both of these slings, I've got the extended fuel tanks, so we can take our total fuel minus our fuel per leg, gives us our fuel remaining. This is our fuel remaining for both tanks, and then we divide that by 2 so we can get our fuel per side. Legally for VFR, you need a half an hour reserve. That would be 2 gallons, 1 gallon per side. Now this is way too squeaky for me. So here, if we have 3 gallons per side, that's at least reasonable. I'm comfortable with that, barely. Of course, in calm winds, it'd be 5 gallons per side, 6 gallons. So we can see from our calculations here with our different scenarios what kind of fuel we're going to have left at the end of our leg. For a flight like this was my checklist of things to bring. Headphones, a flight tracker, 12-volt to iPhone adapter, food, water, piss bottle, toilet paper, screens update for the MGL panels, portable radio, canopy cover for the aircraft, tie downs for the aircraft, a booster pad that I could boost me up if I need to, iPad for ForeFlight, iPhone with ForeFlight backup, sleeping bag, pad, pillow in case I got to sleep at any airport, a backpack in case I need to go anywhere, shaving kit, jacket, sandals, a computer for layovers if I need to spend some time and get stuck somewhere, phone, headphones, flashlight, glasses, sunglasses, and a hat. So this is the list I used to get there and actually allowing if I had to stay overnight or out in the middle of nowhere. So I flew into Chicago with the airlines, drove out to Galt Airport, small little airport here. Arrived late afternoon, went up, took the airplane around the pattern a couple times. Of course, notice there's no AWAS, anything. Small, tiny airport here. No one on the radio. Flew just like my Sling, exactly as I thought it would be. Ready to go. So, next morning, arrive at Galt Airport just after sunrise. Load this airplane up with all my stuff. Daniela took my money. Jeremy filled it up. And off I went. I got out of there around 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's pretty much all flat. Look at all these airports all along here. Plenty of spots to troubleshoot. Then we get into Nebraska. It starts going up. We get a little bit less airports here and to Cheyenne. So there we go. Finally in the air. Sun up my back. Headed west. And not much out there except for an airport here and there. So I just decided to cruise west 6,500. And you notice here we get our true airspeed just about 100. I get a little bit of a headwind. Ground speed's only 93. And our gallons per hour, 4 gallons per hour. RPM. EGTs are leaned out real good, full fuel. We're on our way. Everything's going to plan. And once I crossed the Mississippi, I decided I was going to get a hold of air traffic control and do flight following. Didn't seem to get anybody here. Tried contacting approach control here. Nothing. Couldn't hear anything. Nothing. So for some reason the radio wasn't working. Since this was a radio I wasn't familiar with, I dug out the manual, went through that. Nothing. After I decided the aircraft radio wasn't going to work, luckily I had my handheld back here. Here you can see all the stuff loaded up. Good water, easy. Everything's easy to get to. I arranged all that ahead of time. Got my handheld radio. With all the airports all over, I just decided I was just going to sit back, enjoy, not do the flight following, and just fly the course. Now this is in the middle of June, so we've got a bunch of clouds that we're starting to build. So I got above those clouds, nice smooth ride. So besides the radio not working, it was somewhat uneventful. And I generally followed the interstates as much as I could. Just as I'm getting ready to come into Cheyenne, things started to go bad. We had clouds building all over, winds all over. So I didn't take any pictures here because I had to operate the stick, the throttle, and the hand radio to get into Cheyenne. And things were bouncing all over the place, trying to find the runway, flying it in with the handheld radio. Came in, nice landing, nice to be on the ground after 7 hours of flight. Now, one of the things too is you're looking on which airport to land. Notice how the airport is pretty close to the city, so it's not long of a walk. Turns out the FB is over here, and I had to walk all the way around here to get to the hotels, which are on this side. But generally, if you can find an airport that's close to town, that's a lot better. So when I fueled up at the airport, I asked them to top it off. It's just a little bit more than 30 gallons. So here I ended up a little bit of 10 gallons total and 5 gallons per side. So it turns out our flight calculations were all correct. Now, one of the key factors of making a flight like this is to make sure you get going early so you can do the best you can do to stay away from all the thunderstorms that build up along the way in the middle of the summer. Now, amazingly, I was able to find this Penny's Diner, which is right next to the hotel, open 24 hours. So I got there about 4 o'clock in the morning. So here we are eating breakfast and planning a flight. Now from Cheyenne to Carson City, there was really 2 alternate ways to go. Now in the West, we've got all these different military operations area, restricted airspace. I decided to go the northern route here, north of Salt Lake City, so I could go right across the Great Salt Lake, since I wanted to see that, and on down here and basically follow the road all the way into Carson. So I got to the FBO early. I knew they opened at 6. So here I am impatiently waiting outside the gate. There's my airplane. All I need to do is get to that airplane and go. So I had to wait for them to open. So I got going on that airplane as soon as possible. Headed on out. So as I'm headed out of Cheyenne, there's a lot more clouds than I really wanted. And looking ahead, it did not look very good. And at this point, I almost turned back. But as I climbed, I could see the mountains ahead. And it looked like with ForeFlight, it was going to break ahead. So luck was with me. It did break, and I headed west over the Rocky Mountains. And continuing on, looking south, it did not look quite so good. And straight ahead, things are looking good. We've got a little bit of rain coming down here, a little Virga, but it looks nice and clear beyond that. And started climbing here to get to 10.5 as our cruising altitude westbound. We can see that our ground speed's 106, 3.5 gallons per hour here at 10,000 feet. Looking good. And we can see some showers ahead here. We're going to miss those. Continuing on straight to the west. And we get past those showers. And we got clear sailing. We're basically following the highway. Here we got our mountains ahead that we yet need to cross. Now at this point we can see we've got a road in the wind farm here. Fort Bridger was a waypoint. And here we are live on ForeFlight with Salt Lake City here. Class Bravo airspace here. And it turns out that these MOAs are active, but not at the altitudes we're going to be flying. But of course, we need to stay right out of this restricted. So we're going to use this corner of the restricted airspace as our waypoint to start turning. And I will say that approaching Salt Lake and the ski areas here and the mountains, Alta, Brighton, was a spectacular. Here it is, the end of June, beginning of July. Here we still have snow out here and snow-capped mountains. Here we are coming over the mountains with the ski areas all in here. We got Salt Lake City here and the Great Salt Lake out here. So here we have the Salt Lake City Airport here, and we're just going slightly north of the Class Bravo airspace. I will say that heading out over the Great Salt Lake was really a spectacular event. And at this point, I was really happy that I decided to take this northern route over the Great Salt Lake. And after the Great Salt Lake, this is up in this area here. This is where we're going to get into the active military operations areas. However, the altitudes that they're operating and where we were different. So we were good to go. At times going over the Great Salt Lake, it was hard to tell what was water and what was land. Amazing textures. So here we are, right next to the restricted airspace, near the active MOA, going for our waypoint here. We can turn left, but we're making sure we stay out of this restricted airspace. Now, once we avoid our restricted airspaces here and start to head out back into Nevada, we've got some new challenges. It's later in the day now, so we're starting to get thunderstorms are starting to develop, so we're going to be fighting those thunderstorms all the way back. And as we pass Wells, we see a huge cloud development forming right over the Ruby Mountains. So we've got to decide, are we going to go over it or under it? Well, I decided the smart thing to do would be to go over it, but it's building fast. So here we are out climbing that development to get through over the Ruby Mountains, over to Elko, which is our next waypoint. And past the Ruby Mountains and on to Elko, our next waypoint. And we've got a nice visual here on the Elko Airport, and here's Highway 80 that heads all the way back to Reno. And as we head out over Nevada, we got cumulus clouds that are building. We still got a ways to go in the flight here, so hopefully they're not going to build too much. And as we fly later in the day, the clouds are getting thicker. And from here, we can see the mountains of California right here. We've got Carson City is right out here, so it looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape here to make it back. So as we finish our journey from Chicago to Cheyenne to Carson, we have another airplane that's almost exactly the same as our first Sling light sport aircraft. Well, thanks for joining me on this cross-country flight.